have never put Florida State in that mix, but with one of the best offensive minds in the game, Mike Norvell, running the show, and then they bring in Gus Malzahn, who's an accomplished head coach, to run the offense. That's got to be a pretty inviting place to land for a young quarterback, with Florida State trying to bounce back from what happened to them last year. And I also know that you've got another quarterback on the board that you're tracking in Jaden O'Neal.
Before we get to Jaden O'Neal, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Keyshawn Henderson going back, like I said, SEC schools, Big Ten schools, ACC schools, everybody have been trying to pull him. But again, got to give it to Keyshawn Henderson for being loyal to and being extremely loyal to Houston, but being extremely transparent. Like I said, this is a kid that plenty were recruiting at other positions, but he was dead set on this offseason, and he's definitely proven why he needs to be a quarterback. And I think too, that was one of the strong foundational points that Houston was like, not only come play and represent your town, have the key to the city, but come play the position that you want about. So again, leave it to Keyshawn Henderson for still remaining loyal. But again, like I said, of all the schools you could have possibly thought outside of Houston that have been knocking on his doors, and believe me, there have been plenty of Power 4 programs looking and selling their pitches down to Keyshawn Henderson and Houston. But Florida State, like you said, and you mentioned all the mentionables up there about why Florida State could be an appealing face. And the reason I say that they've made segue is it's one thing to put out an offer there. It's one thing to keep an open telephone line, of communication, which they've definitely done. But when you can land a visit from a kid like Keyshawn Henderson, that says a lot. And Florida State has made that segue. So again, this upcoming weekend is going to be a huge weekend, as they are going to be set to host Keyshawn Henderson. So Florida State definitely will be one to watch. And again, much like Houston, I think what makes Florida State an appealing place for a kid like Keyshawn Henderson, blue chip kid who's just an all-around athlete, and just, has really rose up the ranks, proving why he's going to be an elite quarterback that I believe will translate, much like some of those other guys that I talked about in DJ Lagway and Keelan Russell in these class recruiting cycles down in that Houston DFW talent, is because there's an opportunity at Florida State for Keyshawn Henderson, much like at Houston, to go be the impact player, to come to get a strong 4 years where he could potentially, find a home for the next few years, where in other places and other SEC schools that have these constant domino battles, that are a little bit less certain. So again, Florida State setting itself up to land one of possibly, they are really setting themselves up as these dominoes fall. They've watched and they've lurked from behind, letting other people make their moves, and they are learning to play chess in this big, interesting recruiting weekend. So again, Keyshawn Henderson set to make an official visit to Florida State. His first official, obviously, outside of Houston. So that's a big move by Florida State and what Norvell's doing down there, to be able to get the blue chip quarterback out of Houston, down there for a visit. So it definitely will be an impactful time for Florida State to make some segue, but big move there by Florida State.
On the Move, folks, with LeeAnn and myself every Wednesday night, 8:30 Eastern. We talk recruiting, we talk transfer portal, we take your calls about everything. Just does not have to necessarily be just about recruiting, but we go late into the night taking your calls here at the Voice of College Football on Wednesday night. So join the fun. The guy that I jumped the gun on, Jaden O'Neal, so he's been committed to Oklahoma for a year now. So yeah, that's been a long-standing commit to Brent Venables, but other programs are not taking him off their board.
Well, we talk about relationships mattered. And like you said, this is a kid who's been loyal to the program for almost over a year. He also even made the transfer from being out in California, wanting to come closer to the Sooner country, transferring from a California school to Oklahoma's Mustang High School. That way he could be right there in the backyard of the place of his future home. This is a kid in a family who's made huge strides, huge loyalty and commitment. But again, we saw last season that not only relationships make a difference in recruiting, but also when we have coaching changes. We know that O'Neal had a huge relationship with then former offensive coordinator Seth Luttrell. He was one of the big guys, of course, responsible for bringing him on board. And then, of course, when we saw that program change and a new recruiter comes in and everything. What we're hearing that the O'Neal family is waiting for dominoes to fall, that not saying that they are going to reopen their commitment, but we also know that Oklahoma is going after a not so far up the way guy in Bo Bentley out of Selena. Of course, we know that Selena made huge strides, was on the news. He's a guy we talked about back in the All-American Bowl, obviously winning a championship there and everything. What we're hearing that with Oklahoma, seeing that they are, it appears with all the coaching changes, new coordinator coming in, that Oklahoma Sooners might be going in a different direction outside of O'Neal. So that has the O'Neal camp kind of opening their waters. And where else are they also looking to? Florida State. So again, as these dominoes fall, and this is again a kid who's right there, 4-star, hanging on that 5-star, made a huge jump from a California school, making big moves, showing his loyalty to a program that he was setting himself up. But again, as coaching changes, as programs go in different direction, you can't blame a kid for Jaden O'Neal also having to be smart and see what else is opportunity. So again, depending how Oklahoma continues to press on getting Selena, Texas quarterback Bo Bentley as their number one guy, this could definitely leave a different dynamic. And again, the other school that is lurking and is also set to get an official visit from Jaden O'Neal will be Florida State. So again, talk about Florida State coming out of nowhere, like that dark horse coming down the stretch. The last school that you think about would be positioning itself for possibly landing one of 2026 top QBs and possibly having the opportunity to flip 2 long-term commits and get them in their backfield. So kudos to Florida State out there. I said Oklahoma State. Kudos to Florida State out there for setting things up. But again, this will be another interesting recruitment to watch. If Oklahoma is able to hold on to this long-term commit, clearly O'Neal has been invested in them, but has Oklahoma returned and reciprocated that same investment? We shall see. But again, we know that Oklahoma has also been highly on the trail and heavily recruiting fellow quarterback, Bo Bentley, who's also another 4-star coming out of Selena, Texas, of course, of, a Texas State title and all those things. So again, it will be a battle down in Norman, but it'll be interesting to see the direction that Jaden O'Neal, if he continues to remain invested in Oklahoma or test the waters and his upcoming visit down to Florida State.
And when it comes to the Florida State angle, on the surface, it would seem difficult for them to be able to reel anyone in coming off the season that was so disastrous last year. But certainly you get somebody like Mike Norvell in front of a young quarterback, and he's able to talk offense, and he's able to look back just a couple of years to Jordan Travis, who became one of the best quarterbacks in ACC history at Florida State. Unfortunately, had that late season injury, his final season, that really prohibited him from competing in the NFL. But that aside, went from not a highly regarded quarterback to one of the best at Florida State that we've ever seen, and led them to an undefeated regular season that last year. And Mike Norvell's had a nice run at Memphis of developing quarterbacks. And again, you bring in Gus Malzahn, and they've got a kind of a double combination punch in regards to offensive prowess at Florida State, and can sell them on promise and what they've done before. They've accomplished it before. And then there's playing time right out of the gate too, in a situation like that. Those possibilities.
That was my next biggest point, because remember, some of these guys, especially at the quarterback position, they may have a 4-year plan, and that 4-year plan may have to have an alternative route. And going to a place like Florida State, knowing that like you said, they're going to be an instant impact player. They have the opportunity to start. If they have the want or desire, well, hey, let me go start for a year. Let me go make some impact. Let me turn a program around. Let me make this big highlight reel, and then let me hit the transfer portal. So again, as much as we talk about all the NIL, we talk about all that time, that's what I think makes a lot of these programs that you would never think about. Never did I think that we're beginning to be talking about so early in this summer, in such a crucial recruiting time, that Florida State could possibly position itself for 3 of the nation's top quarterbacks, including 5-star, including 2 Houston commits, two Houston and Oklahoma commits. So again, it just goes to show, as the dominoes fall, as programs go one direction, as personnel change, anything can happen. But like we say, we are just kicking off June, and it is still a long way to December. So a lot of these programs are going to have a big summer ahead of them, trying to keep these guys on board.